I feel like the levels in Doom: The Dark Ages are too long. People have complained about the music, which took a little quality hit, but it's still fine. About the new combat, which I think is just different but still super fun. And about the highly demanding graphics, which, yeah, I'm sorry guys, I can't defend you on this one. They look good, but every fiber of my PC was trying its hardest to keep this game running at 60 FPS, and it still failed often enough. It was crazy. But I want to be unique and special, so I will put forward my own unique complaint. I think the levels in Doom: The Dark... I already said that. This is the case in a lot of games nowadays, not just the new Doom. But since it's the game where it was the most noticeable for me, it will be my problem child for today. Whenever I booted up Doom: The Dark Ages for a nice evening play session, I could never motivate myself to play more than 2 chapters or levels in one session. Each level took me about 30 to 50 minutes on the first playthrough, and there are 2 main factors that influence that playtime. For one, playstyle. I'm a completionist, so I will always try to find every little thing that was hidden in the level for me. That surely adds a good 10 minutes or more to most levels. But I also feel that the Dark Ages heavily emphasizes exploration, which I'll get to later, so I think it's fair to see those additional 10 minutes as required playtime. Second, the difficulty. If you play Doom on the difficulty level that corresponds to your skill level, you will likely reach those 30 to 50 minutes of playtime per level. If you choose to go for a higher difficulty, it will take longer because the fights take longer and you will likely die more, with each death adding somewhere between 30 seconds and 3 minutes to the tally, depending on how much progress you lose for your death. For my first playthrough, I played on Nightmare difficulty, which is the hardest difficulty that doesn't delete your save file on death, and I died about an average of 4 times per level. I didn't keep track of it, so it might be more or less, but when thinking back, there were some levels where I didn't die, and some where I died like 10 times, so it feels like the right average for it. So without any deaths and exploration, you might achieve a time like 20 to 30 minutes per level on your first playthrough. Now I emphasize first playthrough so much because if you choose to do multiple playthroughs, you're gonna blast through the levels a lot faster with each playthrough because, well, you're getting better at the game. And since not everyone chooses to do multiple playthroughs, the most honest and fair review is, in my opinion, of the first playthrough. Looking back at Doom Eternal, only the longest levels ever took me about 30 minutes to beat. Same playstyle and same difficulty. So Doom levels did in fact become longer, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're better or worse now. While raw playtime obviously plays an important role in why a level feels too long, I think the much more important factor is fatigue and exhaustion, because depending on the game, a 3-minute level can already be too long, like in Neon White, where the general action-to-action gameplay is very fast, and the vast majority of levels take less than a minute to complete. On the other hand, a 50-minute level in Sniper Elite feels just right. You need to explore lots of different routes to choose which one is your preferred one to approach the main objective, and the gameplay is quite slow to allow players to tackle these objectives at their own pace. So the verdict is that the faster the gameplay, the shorter the levels should be? Kind of? It's not that easy. Listen, it's true that games with faster gameplay will exhaust the player quicker. And therefore, in those games, shorter levels will likely have your players enjoy your overall game for longer. But while it is a big part, pinning my problems with the new Doom solely on the extended playtime would be incorrect. What's much more important than the raw playtime is the pacing. Pacing is very tough to explain. Okay, I'll give it my best shot. Pacing is something that I've actually never explained before, so it's going to be quite tough to do this in this video like this, and I'm kind of nervous. So if I explain it wrong, don't be too harsh with me. Pacing is... I'm not sure I can actually do this. Pacing is essentially the stress put on the player throughout the level or game. Stress in this case is the difficulty in relation to player skill. We create stress by giving the player challenges to complete and putting problems on the way to complete these challenges. We can control the amount of stress by adjusting the difficulty of the problems and challenges, or simply increase it by introducing new challenges, new problems, or new tools to overcome these problems. We usually want to end up with a curve that is as close to the player skill line as possible, within this so-called flow channel. Anything above this channel risks frustrating the player because it is too difficult, and anything below risks boring the player because it is not demanding enough. As mentioned, we control the stress curve with what I'll refer to as events. In the case of Doom, events to increase the player stress can be as simple as an arena with more enemies or an arena with more waves of enemies, but some special events would be the introduction of a new weapon, a new enemy, or even a new puzzle element. The difficulty in the latter three lies in the player learning and getting adjusted to these new game mechanics. It's good to mix these up throughout the course of the level and the whole game, because it keeps the game fresher and more interesting for longer, rather than just steadily increasing difficulty. Now, I have no problem with how Doom: The Dark Ages handles that. I think in most levels and over the course of the entire game, they space out these events well enough to keep me coming back for more, even if a lot of these newly introduced tools feel pointless, which I'll get to later. Pointing back to the curve, as you can see, we also want some stress plateaus or dips in the level. So we can either give the player a little break and allow them to recover from a long period of constant stress, or allow players to master and grow confidence in the handling of a new tool or mechanic, or to create a bigger moment with the next increase of difficulty or intensity, where you ultimately didn't increase the maximum intensity of your level that much, but with that little dip, you have a bigger delta between the current intensity and the new intensity, which makes the player perceive this intensity change as more extreme than if you had just steadily increased the intensity up to that point. Does that make sense? It's why in like every song ever, you have a build up to the chorus, then a little break, and then the chorus comes in with a loud bang to make that moment feel bigger than it actually is. These dips are incredibly difficult to get right because you can't bore the player, but you want to give them a little breathing room. You can do this very efficiently by switching to a different challenge that ideally uses some, but not all parts of the core gameplay loop to put less stress on the player, but at the same time still challenge them in a way that fits seamlessly into the rest of the game. You can see how this can be a difficult balancing act, and it's in these dips where I feel like Doom: The Dark Ages loses me. Like with increasing difficulty, there should also be a few different events to decrease stress. In Doom, those would be transitions between arenas, cutscenes, exploration bits, and puzzles. This is something they've carried over from other Doom games, but once again, like in its predecessor Doom Eternal, they've reinvented it to fit the core gameplay loop of this new Doom. The thing is, I feel like this new core gameplay loop doesn't support these dip events well enough to allow the levels to be this much longer. The combat in Doom Eternal is centered around moving efficiently around the arena, strafing from enemies to pickups to advantage points, but never really allowing the player to stand still. In the Dark Ages, the movement is limited to sprinting and shield bashing, which fits very well with the more reactionary playstyle that the parry-focused combat demands of the player, but it does bring the unfortunate side effect of having much less arena variety across the whole game. Because the movement is so limited, the designers also don't have as many levers to play with when it comes to arena design. Without the monkey bars, meat hook, and double and wall jumps, you lose a lot of that easy access to verticality, so the designers have to compensate for that by making the arenas a lot flatter. This makes elevation matter a lot more, as enemies on high ground are now a lot harder to kill. However, most arenas end up feeling like they are one and the same, and a lot of the enemy encounters play out the exact same way every time, no matter the arena. Where the arena variety in Doom: The Dark Ages basically varies between lots of space and not a lot of space. One thing I loved about Doom Eternal was how the different arena designs kept each fight fresh, even without adding any new enemies, weapons, or power-ups. You could play against the exact same set of enemies 5 times in one level, but the arena having more or less verticality, layers of elevation, walls and corridors to hide in, all of that drastically changed your approach to fight these enemies, so you never end up fighting the same fight twice. Now, it's not like this is a huge issue with the Dark Ages. The combat is just slower, which already contributes to the longer fights and also allows for a slight increase in level duration. Skadoosh. Where the missing deeper movement mastery is an issue, however, is in the downtime events. And to explain that, I'm gonna have to go on a small tangent first. I mentioned earlier that some of the tools introduced throughout the game felt useless. With that, I meant the weapons. There are just too many of them. Besides the movement, the other core part of Doom Eternal's combat was quickly swapping to the right tool to abuse your target's weakness. However, my main criticism of the game back then was that there were already too many weapons. I barely ever used the chain gun, only ever made use of one weapon mod for both the shotgun and the heavy cannon, and the ballista was only ever pulled out for the big cacodemons and the big cacodemons only. Now, that was with 8 weapons, 14 if we count each weapon mod as its own weapon, and I already struggled to fit them all into my combat routine. The Dark Ages boasts a selection of 12 different weapons, where the weapons don't have swappable mods anymore, but it's rather just 2 different weapons on one weapon slot that you can swap in between. Now I'm only counting weapons to shoot, so no melee, flamethrower, chainsaw or shield, because those aren't swappable, you always have access to all of them, and in both games they are integral to the core combat routine, no matter what weapons you use. But man, 12? In a game where swapping doesn't really matter? I really only use like half of them. Both the shotguns, the shredder to explode big enemies with my shield, the rocket launcher because, well, boom. And later in the game I also added the chain shot into my routine, because the parry into an instantly fully powered shot goes kinda hard. Now those are the weapons I typically cycle through in combat, but I also use the cycler and both the skull crushers, but only in very specific situations. But the other 4 truly never get any action. And it's not like ammo is scarce in this game, so you'd be forced to abandon your comfort strategy to use a different weapon. Every area has twice the ammo needed to beat it, bars, and you can always just melee enemies to receive some more, although you can only do that thrice, similar to the chainsaw in Eternal. But still, way more than enough ammo. This has the unfortunate side effect of making exploring for gold way less appealing once you have established that routine, because you know that you will never upgrade 4 of these weapons, so there's no real point in finding the gold to upgrade them, except if you're a completionist. But even then, as someone who loves to explore every nook and cranny a game has to offer, I found that exploration only makes my problem of longer levels a lot worse, and this is where the game truly loses me. Now this is for one, because the levels are so big and have so many nooks and crannies to explore, but also because, well, again, without the focus on movement, you don't really have any way of traversal other than just walking/sprinting, swimming, and climbing. So with bigger levels and bigger and longer exploration routes that can only really be explored by walking or sprinting, you tend to have a lot more downtime where you're not really doing anything interesting or challenging. But it still feels mandatory because you need it to upgrade your weapons and for your intrinsic desire to have that beautiful triple-digit number below the thumbnail of every chapter. With the platforming challenges like dashing, climbing, and the monkey bars, there was a different kind of challenge that would occupy and additionally motivate you to go explore. Kind of like, hey, do you want to take a break from fighting to do some platforming and explore? But in the Dark Ages, it's more like, hey, do you want to walk over there and get that gold? Yeah, sure, I will. Hey, do you want to walk over there and solve a puzzle to get that gold? Okay, yeah, cool, I'll do that. Hey, do you want to walk over there and solve a puzzle to get that gold? Nah, I'm good actually. Hey, do you want to walk over there and get that gold? I said I'm good. Hey, do you want to walk over there and get that gold? Just leave me alone, please. Hey, do you want to walk over there and get that gold? This is not just true for the optional exploration bits, but also for the transitions between arenas. Instead of having a platforming challenge that challenges the player in a different way, but not to a point where they become exhausted from the constant challenge of combat and platforming, but rather in a way that keeps them occupied while moving to the next combat challenge, which, if you remember, is a good use of a dip section. In the new Doom, they just have to walk, or climb, or watch a cutscene, or take a 30-second elevator while some character you forgot existed babbles about something you forgot was important. And then you do that again, and again, and again. Sometimes you can find a little puzzle in those transitioning stages, and those are appreciated, thank you very much. Or you have to fight your way to the next arena, which is better than nothing, but again, it's just more of the same challenge, but less challenging this time, which is also not very exciting. And the exploration is also no challenge, because every item is just shown to you on the Automap when you are in what I consider to be a pretty big range of it. So all you have to do now is figure out how you can walk there, making it kind of just a checklist now and forcing you to spend so much time in that overhead map and just constantly checking if you're not going the wrong way, which worsens the increased downtime problem. This increased downtime and repeated challenge just makes the levels feel so much longer than they already are. Add to that all these little time wasters, and you're gonna start to look for ways to cut that time short, meaning you start skipping cutscenes on your first playthrough, or you purposefully ditch exploration to get to the next arena as quickly as possible. And I feel like if a player chooses to abandon exploration in a game where they are pushed to explore, along with their intrinsic desire to already do that, then you're doing something wrong. So if it's broken, there's gotta be a way to fix this, right? I don't think there's a definitive correct solution to this, but here's what I would prefer. Every level is condensed to about 60 to 70% of its current length and size. Reduce the amount of long exploration routes, and for the ones that stay in the game, give them a tougher challenge than just walking and climbing in a few baby demons to slay. I love the puzzles and extra arenas, so if that's all I've got to deal with on these long detours, I'm in. None of the collectibles should be shown on the overhead map until you've actually seen them. That would make exploration feel so much more rewarding because you allow the player to have this moment of, oh my god, some gold, every time they find it, which is a small but often overlooked and very important reward. I would be motivated so much more to actually take the time to go explore, even backtrack to some of the corners of the level I haven't been to yet to dig around and hopefully find something to reward my time spent there. So it's either that or make this game Doom Eternal too, but I think that would be boring and lazy, so let's try the first proposal, please. The more I thought about it during the making of this video, the more I feel like the Automap is actually a huge part of why the downtime feels so boring. There's no real reward for discovering something, because you don't discover anything. You kinda just do some grocery shopping. You have a list of things to find and where you can find them, then you go pick them up, and then you get out. And I think most of us can agree that single-player grocery shopping isn't really that fun. Now how about a checklist so that no one ever makes this video about your game? Make sure to plan the duration of your levels in relation to your game's tempo. Make sure your core gameplay loop is one that supports both your increases and decreases of stress. Pay attention to both your peaks and dips and make sure they aren't too long or too short. So don't be afraid to make a shorter game if it means keeping the action, pacing, and quality at a higher level. Focus on replayability if you want the player to rack up more hours in your game. Because even though I don't speak for anyone but myself, I'm sure that I'm not the only one who would rather play a well-paced, adequately sized 10-hour game 3 times over than a poorly paced, bloated 30-hour game even just once. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video where I will finally deliver on my promise and make my big announcement, so make sure you don't miss that. It's going to be the talk of the town for a while, let me tell you that much. Anyway, it's lovely to be back, and until next month, I want you all to take care.